Each year, the 8th grade students at East Norton Middle School work hard demonstrating their research and writing skills by learning about an influential figure in our American history. To celebrate the hard work, the students become their assignments as a part of the Living History Museum. Each student represents an influential person and will tell their story to you. Thank you for coming and enjoy your museum tour.
Courage has no limit. Hi, my name is Dorothy Vaughan. I was born September 20th in 1910 in Kansas, Missouri. When I was 2 years old, my birth mom passed away and soon my father remarried. After my father remarried, our family moved to Morgantown, West Virginia. In Morgantown, West Virginia, I then learned how to read, write, and do simple math before attending school, which then allowed me to advance 2 grades. After my years in elementary through middle school, I had then went to Beechers High School. At Beechers High, I was known to be one of the smartest African-American females to attend that school, which then gave me a great advantage into getting into college. And getting into college, for me, being an African-American female, was very hard at that time. After I graduated from Beechers High School, I went to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I attended Wilberforce University. At Wilberforce University, I therefore majored in math, science, and computer technology. After I graduated from college, I then became a math teacher at 3 different schools in Kansas until I was accepted into the NACA, which is now known as NASA. At NASA, you may remember me from the movie Hidden Figures, but at NASA, I started my own women's group, which was called the West Computing Pool, where a group of African-American women had then solved different calculations and math problems to launch a rocket into space without using a calculator like nowadays. You also may remember me from sneaking into and fixing the IBM machine. An IBM machine is a machine, international business machine, which helps to launch a rocket into space without having you do all the work yourself. My goal in life was to show women, African-American women in general, that as long as you put your heart and mind to what you want to do and accomplish, you can achieve it. Sadly, I died November 20th in 2008 at the age of 98. Thank you for your time.
Hello, it is I, Alexander Hamilton, founding father of the country you and I call the United States of America. It was thanks to my efforts, with admittedly some help, that this great and fair nation is the great country that it is today. I was born on January 11th, 1755 or 1757. My mother, unfortunately, was not married to my father as she cheated on her husband, and I was born because of that. You see, my biological father later abandoned me as a child, leaving me to live with my mother until she died in 1768. I was then sent to live with my cousin afterwards until he committed suicide, also leaving me alone. Then after that, I suffered bullying as a child, which led me to develop some emotional problems. However, when my mother was still alive, I got my first job at the age of 11. Between me and my mother, I made most of our money, as my mother really did not work at all. However, I was really good at my job, and so good, however, that my employer, with the help of his friends, decided to send me to the American colonies for an education. Upon arrival, I was enrolled in King's College, though after I found out about this new revolution that the colonists were planning, I decided to drop out and become a soldier. In doing so, I helped the U.S. win one of the most major battles of the Revolutionary War, known as the Battle of Yorktown. That battle secured our American independence. After that, I decided to help the U.S. establish a government, as I was one of the authors of the Art of the Federalist Papers that supported a government similar to the one that we have today. After that, the U.S. Constitution was ratified, so I decided to start my own law firm. This law firm helped repeal an act the Americans placed on their peoples, helped pro-British supporters after the war, and I became one of the president's most sought-after advisors. Soon after, however, I decided that I still wasn't done with government, and I became the U.S.'s first Secretary of State. In doing so, I helped start a federal tax collection system, helped the U.S. pay its debts to countries such as France for helping us win the war, and I even started my own bank, which was the first bank in America. After that, I decided that I would be finally done with government, as I married Elizabeth Schuyler. However, I was in love with another woman at the time, known as Maria Reynolds, whom I had an affair with. Afterwards, I died on July 12, 1804. A man named Aaron Burr challenged me to a duel. I agreed because I considered him to be my enemy. However, during the battle, I missed him with my gunshot, but he shot me in the chest, and I later died to my wounds. However, even with that, I still can say that I helped America become one of the best countries that still exists today. And even though I was born with nothing, I died a powerful man, and I believe that you can too. Thank you for listening.
The one and only who gave significant research, the one and only who overcame the speculations is none other than I, Elmer Samuel Imes. I was born October 12, 1883, just 2 months before Lincoln freed the slaves. My father was born a free black in Oberlin, but my mother was born a slave, sadly, moved to Oberlin when she was a child. She didn't talk about it that much, so that's all I know. My parents are both college graduates, so they automatically said, "You, Elmer Imes, you're going to school." So I enrolled at school in Oberlin. After 12 years, the Emancipation Proclamation happened. My parents became missionaries and moved to Alabama. That's actually where I started and ended high school. At the high school, I enrolled at Fisk University and ended with my bachelor's degree. I actually started teaching math and physics at Fisk. Then I later realized that I didn't want to grow ground in the field that I was working in. So I went back to Fisk and earned my master's degree. After my master's degree, it hit me. In order for me to truly be successful in my career, I needed to learn. But how could I? With the situation I was in, with the Negro status, that's all the level of education I could achieve. So I knew I needed to be applied in northern schools. So I applied at Michigan University, and that's where I ended my college journey with my PhD in physics. That's right, I'm the second African American to earn his PhD in physics. After I got this knowledge and I used it to revolutionize the quantum theory. The quantum theory is a branch of physics dealing with the nature of subatomic particles. I had to figure this out through a different experiment I was working on, which is called infrared spectroscopy, which is when infrared light interacts with a molecule. After I got research for this, after I got recognition for this groundbreaking research, I actually went to New York and actually realized that one of my students had died in Georgia. So one of my colleagues and I went down to investigate. What I found was disgusting. My student could have been saved from death, but she was killed because a white doctor refused to operate on her, and she was killed by when she was hit by a car. She was actually taken to the home of a woman named Miss Wilson, where she was kind enough to help, but she did not have the tools to save my student. So my student perished at her home. I later died of cancer, 9/11, 1941.
My name is Molina, and I was born in Mexico City, where I attended elementary school and high school. When I was young, I was very interested in science, specifically chemistry. With help of my aunt, Esther Molina, who was a chemist, I was able to create a chemistry lab in my bathroom. There, I was able to conduct many experiments that my aunt came up with. I went to college at Albert Lugman's University of Freiburg, and after graduating, I went to the University of California at Berkeley. On my 5th year at Berkeley, I joined Professor F. Sherwood Rollins to do a research project concerning pollutants in the atmosphere. The pollutants we were working with were chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs for short. These CFCs were made of organic materials such as chlorine, fluorine, and carbon. We set out to discover whether these CFCs had any adverse effects on the atmosphere. At first, the subject seemed a little boring, but nothing spectacular came out of releasing them into the atmosphere, until I ran a simulation on what happens when they reach the stratosphere. I found that they accumulate there. Ultraviolet radiation breaks them down, which produces chlorine. When chlorine reacts with ozone, it creates chlorine monoxide and oxygen, which destroys the ozone in the process. I decided to share my findings with Professor Sherwood, and we both decided that the public had to know as soon as possible. CFCs were used in everything from refrigerators to spray cans to being used as chemical propellants for planes. If enough CFCs were released into the atmosphere, then the ozone layer could be so damaged that life on land can no longer be possible, which includes humans. After publishing my findings in a magazine, there was a huge controversy about whether my findings were true. Because of this, I needed evidence that CFCs had depleted ozone before. A few years after I published my findings, Joseph Farman, Brian Garner, and Jonathan Shanklin discovered the ozone hole over Antarctica. The ozone hole was a huge gap in the ozone layer that had 35% less ozone than any other place in the world, due to CFCs. Now that I had the ozone hole as evidence for my theory, many countries such as the United States, Canada, Sweden, and Norway started to ban the production and use of CFCs. Eventually, the entire world stopped using CFCs, and the ozone layer was no longer in danger. After all of this, I decided to become a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There, I continued my research and found that ice crystals in the Antarctic air enhanced CFC's destructive capabilities, which is why CFCs had a much greater impact on the Antarctic atmosphere. Because of my groundbreaking work, I received many awards, such as the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, the Escalante Award, the UN Medal, the NASA Medal for Exceptional Scientific Achievement, the UN Environmental Program Global 500 Award, and the American Chemical Society Prize. I also served as an environmental advisor on the transition team of President Barack Obama and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Currently, I'm working on research concerning air quality and global change issues. Thank you for listening.
My name is Jaime Escalante. I was born December 31st, 1930. I was the second child born to Zanoba and Sarah Escalante. As a child, I amused myself by playing soccer, basketball, and handball. I also spent a lot of time with my grandfather. In the 1960s, I immigrated to the United States to seek a better life. I also had to um, do many odd jobs there and teach myself English. Um, Before I could return to the classroom, I had to earn another bachelor's degree. After earning my teacher credentials, I got a job as a math teacher in Garfield High School, East Los Angeles, California, in 1974. But I later found myself in a challenging situation teaching mathematics to troubled students and known in a rundown school known for drugs and violence. But I offered to teach them advanced placement calculus, and I started an advanced mathematics program. I worked my students hard. I made them come an hour early to school, and I made them stay after school. However, my students took a state standardized test, and all passed, but were accused of cheating by the test company because they are racist. Some of my students retook the test, all passing, proving that they know the material, and that the test company was wrong. I later on retired in 1998, but what I've accomplished at Garfield, I won many awards. I have also, there's even a book and movie about it called Stand and Delivered. I sadly died on March 30th, 2010 at age 79 after a long battle with bladder cancer. Thank you for listening.
Awe, or greetings. My name is Joseph Powell, but I am better known as Chief Osceola. This is my story of how we opened this country's eyes to the horrors their government was committing, and how I beat the odds even when they were not in my favor. I was an only child. My mother was part of a Native American Creek tribe, which is located near what is now Tuskegee, Alabama. I was born in 1804, and my father was an Englishman trader named William Powell, who left me when I was very young. My tribe was relocated to the Florida Everglades, where we integrated with the Seminole tribe. The tribe distanced themselves from me as much as possible because I was only half Native American, so I had to work twice as hard to prove myself to them. This, of course, paid off because I later became leader of the tribe. I am best known for defending my homeland from the U.S. government, who is trying to relocate the Seminole tribe. Since we did not have the same level of equipment that the government did, my tribe relied on guerrilla warfare tactics and ambushes to stand a chance. I am also well known for showing this country the atrocities their government was committing towards Native Americans at the time. One large example of these atrocities is the Trail of Tears, when about 4,000 Cherokee Indians died while being relocated from their homeland. I am also well known for allowing escaped slaves and freemen to join the Seminole tribe and have families with the other tribe members. I changed America by inspiring many to speak up against the government's actions and to be more conscious of how other races are treated and to be more accepting of other races as people. Thank you.
That's not what your country can do for you. That's what you can do for your country. I said this when I became president to motivate young people. Hello, my name is John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I was the second oldest of 9 children. I was raised in Massachusetts, and I was raised by a wealthy family. I went to boarding school in Connecticut and college, followed by college at Harvard. I excelled in English and history. After graduation, I joined the U.S. Navy and was assigned to the South Pacific. I sustained a bad back injury, but the thing that made me most famous was at the age of 29, I became president. I won a seat in the House of Representatives and later became president of the United States. I was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald in 1963.
Hello, my name is Toni Morrison. I was born on February 18, 1931 in Lorain, Ohio to George and Rama Wofford. My mother was a domestic worker, and my father held 3 jobs for 17 years to support the family. In first grade, I was the only African-American student who could read, and my family's storytelling was very important. My family instilled a love for reading in me. I attended Lorain High School and graduated with high honors. In 1949, I left Ohio to attend Howard University. 2 years later, I went to Cornell University to get my master's degree in literature. While attending Howard, I met my soon-to-be husband, Harold Morrison. We had 2 young children, Harold Morrison Jr. and Slade Morrison. In 1964, we divorced. I moved to New York to work as an editor at a Random House. I also started to focus on my career as an author. In 1970, I released my first novel, The Bluest Eye. All of my novels are based on things I have experienced firsthand, and daily African American struggles. Today, I am still alive at the age of 86. This is my story. Thank you for listening.
My name is Gredis Gomez de Avellaneda. I was born in 1814, March 23rd, in Camagüey, Cuba. I was born to one of the most wealthiest and well-known families in Cuba. My father, Manuel, was a naval officer, and my mother, Francesca, was a housewife. Due to us being very wealthy, we had a lot of slaves, so thus we had a lot of time on our hands. My mother taught me everything I needed to know from reading to writing. My father died when I was 9 years old, and my mother later remarried. When my mother remarried, she had 5 other kids, but they sadly died due to a disease. When I was 13, I was promised to marry a distant relative, and when I was 15, I broke off the marriage, thus getting taken out of my grandfather's will. When I was 21, my family moved to Spain, and when I was 22, I moved back to Cuba to marry. After my husband died at 23, I moved back to Spain with my family. I wrote poetry and books. My best-selling book was Sab. It was a romantic novel about a slave falling in love with his master's daughter. I died at the age of 59 years old in 1873 from a disease called diabetes.
Have you ever heard the expression that the blind are leading the blind? It usually means that somebody inept or inexperienced is trying to teach somebody with just as little experience as them, meaning no progress gets made. However, in my case, the blind leading the blind takes on a totally different meaning. Hello there, my name's Ann Sullivan. You've probably never heard of me, but I'm sure you have heard of my star student, Helen Keller. She was a young blinded deaf woman whom I taught how to communicate. I'll get back to her later, but for now, I'll begin. I was born on April 14th, 1866 in Feeding Hills, Massachusetts. My mother died when I was only 8 years old, and shortly after, my father walked out on the family. I was sent to the Tewksbury Almshouse, which was an orphanage, where I would stay for 5 more years. Even though I was 13 at the time, I had still never had any sort of public schooling. So one day, I begged the state inspector who was coming to investigate if I could finally go to school, and surely enough, by that fall, I was enrolled in Perkins School for the Blind. I should mention around this point that I wasn't born blind. Due to untreated eye infections when I was very young, also called trachoma, I had developed very severe blindness, which would haunt me throughout my life. However, even though I had very poor social skills due to never being in a social environment before, I soared academically, and in 4 years' time, I graduated as valedictorian of the school. Despite being valedictorian, I still was clueless about what I was going to do with my life. Luckily, my school director, Michael Agagnos, pulled through. I would have a job working with a 7-year-old blind and deaf girl named Helen Keller. I moved to Tuscumbia, Alabama in order to help her, which is where she lived. I met her on March 3rd, 1887. The two of us didn't get along at first, but shortly afterwards we became lifelong friends. At first, she was very prone to fits of anger and was very frustrated at the world around her. I made no progress with her even after months and months of teaching. But after that, we had a breakthrough, and after that, we became very close friends. I ended up tutoring her for another 11 years, at the end of which she graduated from Radcliffe College with a degree in liberal arts. I ended up accompanying her on many speaking tours throughout her life, and I also helped her to publish her autobiography. I died on October 20th, 1936, at the age of 70 of heart failure. Although I only lived for 70 years, I like to believe that my 70 years were enough for me to make a major contribution in the life of Helen Keller.
Hi,
Thank
my
you.
name is Cornel West. I was born June 2nd, 1953 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. When I was younger, I had 3 siblings and we lived in Sacramento, California. I then went to a Baptist church to listen to prayers from preachers whose grandfathers were slaves. I went on to go to Harvard University, and I enrolled in Princeton University for my bachelor's degree in philosophy. I starred in movies such as The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, and I had 2 kids, and I have my own company named Cornel West Academy of Excellence. I'm currently 63 years old, and I'm still living. I'm Cornel West. Thank you for listening.
Do you know how it feels like flying in midair? Well, I do. I'm Amelia Earhart, and I was born July 24th, 1897 in Athens, Kansas. As a child, I was adventurous and liked playing outside. After high school and college, I then went to Toronto, Canada to visit my sister. I met many who were wounded and were pilots. In 1921, I purchased my first second-hand Canary Airstars biplane, painted it yellow, and called it the Canary. In 1928, I got a phone call from Captain Hilton Raleigh asking if I'd like to fly the Atlantic with him. In a heartbeat, I said yes. Soon, I became the first woman to fly the Atlantic as a passenger and became known as Lady Lindy. I was also involved in the 99s, an organization to help female pilots advance as aviators. I became the organization's first president in 1930. I was determined to fly across the world, so I did. On March 17th, 1937, I flew Unfortunately, it was a fail, so a second attempt was made on June. In the beginning, it went pretty well, but then one day on July 2nd, 1937, me and my plane mysteriously disappeared on Howland Island. I was then legally declared dead on January 5th, 1939, and was never found. Thank you for listening.
Do any of you know what career path you'll take? Well, I certainly didn't know when I was younger. But before I continue speaking, let me first introduce myself. I'm Ochoa, a veteran U.S. astronaut, and I'm mostly known for becoming the first Hispanic female astronaut. But I also have patents for 3 optical systems, and I'm a member of many organizations. I'm also married to Cole Myers, with whom I have 2 children with. I was born in Los Angeles, California, to my parents, Joseph and Rosanna Ochoa, as the third of 5 children. While growing up, I watched the space race, and a female astronaut, especially a Hispanic female, was a far-fetched dream. I never even considered taking that career path until I was in grad school. My father's parents immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico. My father faced discrimination all throughout his childhood. He feared that we, his children, would face the same discrimination, so he discouraged us from speaking Spanish. My mother raised us with the idea that education was everything. She was right. It's what makes you different. It's what makes you stand out. And so after I was born, she decided she would earn a college degree. Since she had a family to take care of, she took 1 class at a time, and it took her 22 years to receive her degree. Her accomplishment encouraged my siblings and I to do better in school and to receive a better education. In my teenage years, my mother and father divorced. My mother had to raise 5 kids by herself, while at the same time I was selling college courses. I decided I would help my mother, and when I received a 4-year scholarship to Stanford, I gave it up to go to a closer college, just so I could help my mother. Later on, I was able to attend Stanford to complete my pre-doctoral work. While studying there, my colleagues encouraged me to apply to NASA's astronaut training program, and so I did. Sadly, I learned I had not been accepted. I didn't let that disappoint me, though, and I started working at Sandia National Laboratories. That same year, 2 of my colleagues and I received a patent for an optical system that inspects objects for flaws in a repeating pattern. We also applied for 2 other patents, one for an optical system that recognizes objects, and another for a procedure that minimizes distortion in images. These patents were accepted later on. Then, I earned my private pilot's license and started working at NASA's ENMS Research Center. This changed my chances of becoming an astronaut, and I was invited for an interview at the Johnson Space Center. There I learned I had been accepted into the astronaut training program, and I began training in 1990. In 1991, I became an official U.S. astronaut. My first mission was 2 years later aboard the STS-56 atmospheric research flight. On this mission, I was the mission specialist and was in charge of the primary payload, the Spartan 201 satellite, which, along with other instruments, studied the solar corona or the sun's outer atmosphere. My second mission was on the STS-66 Atlas III flight. On this mission, I was the payload commander. On my third mission, the STS-96, our shuttle was the first to dock with the International Space Station. On my last mission, the STS-110, I was the mission specialist and flight engineer. 6 years later, after I retired from flying, I became deputy director of the Johnson Space Center, where I had originally trained to become an astronaut. In 2012, I became the second female and first Hispanic director of the Johnson Space Center, a job I continue to hold to this day. I've also been awarded NASA's highest award, the Distinguished Service Medal, and have 6 schools named after me. As I've also stated, I'm a member of many organizations, including the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I, along with other females, have opened the doors to the young people of our society, and with the opportunities we have given them, I believe they shouldn't be afraid to reach for the stars.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Cole. I was born March 16, 1845 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I attended many schools to further my education and change the image of my future. I attended the Institute for Colored Youth in 1863. Then I went on to graduate from the New England Female Medical College in 1864. I became an advocate for the poor, and I opened a Women's Directory Center in 1873. The center I opened helped women and children with their medical and legal services. I am most known for becoming the second African-American female physician in opening a Women's Directory Center. The death of me was August 14th, 1945. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Jose Marti. I was born January 28th, 1853, and I died May 19th, 1895. I had a rough childhood. I was the oldest out of my 7 siblings. Parents couldn't afford couldn't afford clothing or shoes for me as a child, so they had to go to work and get money for my younger siblings. Once I turned 16, I had gotten arrested for trying to express my feelings in Cuba for the fact that Spain was ruling over Cuba and had laws that weren't for Cuba. I traveled around the world as I grew up. I went to Spain, then France, and then I traveled back to Cuba to visit family members. Then I went to the United States, where in New York I had gotten a job as a news reporter, a news writer, and I shortly traveled back to Cuba to get to fight for my country in Cuba so that we could get our independence back. Some of my quotes are: "Talent is a gift that brings with it an obligation to serve the world and not ourselves, for it is not our making, and mountains, climates, and peaks, and nations and men." Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Barack Obama. I was born August 4th, 1961, in Honolulu, Hawaii. I have African father named Barack Obama and a white mother named Ann Dunham. With 2 sisters and 6 brothers. I lived with my grandparents since the 5th grade. When I was growing up, I moved back and forth from my grandparents' house to my mother's house. I got enrolled in Ponabon Academy, later graduated with academic honors. I earned my law degree in Columbia University and Harvard Law School. I struggled in life because I was a mixed race. I would get discriminated from my own people because it was disliked and uncommon. My career accomplishments were that I fought Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. We won. I fought for president against John McCain, won, becoming the fourth president of the United States. I got reelected in 2012 against Mitt Romney. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Alberto Gonzales, and I am known for being the first ever Hispanic U.S. Attorney General. My journey began in 1972 when I graduated high school and I went on to the Air Force. But in 1979, I decided that life wasn't for me, and I decided to go on to complete my bachelor's degree. And I would later go on to earn it in 1982. In 1997, I would go on and I became the Texas Secretary of State. I lasted on that position until 1999. But later that year, I was appointed to the Supreme Court House of Texas. And I made history on February 3rd, 2005, by becoming the first ever Hispanic U.S. Attorney General. Now, in 2006, I made a bad decision I decided to retire some attorney generals, and this led to a bunch of problems. But the president had my back looking for me, and he told them to cool off. They did. They didn't want to, but they did. And in 2007, I decided that life wasn't for me. Now, I'm currently still alive at age 61, and I live with my wife, Rebecca, and my 3 sons, and I teach full-time as a teacher in Belmont University College. My name is Alberto Gonzales, and thank you for listening to me. Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Julia de Burgos. I was born February 17, 1913 in Carolina, Puerto Rico. I had 13 siblings, and I was the only one of 13 siblings who finished high school. I completed a university degree at the age of 19, which was very unusual at the time. Later on, I published 2 collections of poems, and then later on, I published my 3rd book in 1953. I impacted people in America with my amazing poetry. I got divorced twice, and then I fell into deep depression. Later on, I died in the hospital due to pneumonia. It was because I had fallen in the sidewalk. With no identification, I was later claimed by some family and friends, and then I was later reburied. Thank you for listening.
I think my painting is so autobiographical if anyone can take the trouble to read it. Do you like to paint? Well, I do. Oh wait, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Lee Krasner, but you probably know me better as Miss Jackson Pollock. Maybe you've heard of some of my art, like Seated Nude, which was created in 1940. No? Maybe one of my more popular works of art, like Night Creatures, which was created in 1965. I was an American abstract expressionist painter from the second half of the 20th century. I was one of the first few female artists to have had a show in the Museum of Modern Art. I was born on October 27, 1908 in Brooklyn, New York. I was the youngest of 6 children to be born to Joseph and Anna Louise Krasner, and the only one to be born in the United States, making me the only automatic U.S. citizen of my family. Originally, my name was Lena, but I liked to be called Leonore as a child, and later changed my name to Lee and took the second S out of my last name. I started showing strong interest in art following my graduation from my public elementary school in 1922. And when I graduated there in 1920, at age 14, I attended Washington Urban High School, and when I graduated there in 1925, I was given a scholarship to attend Women's School of Cooper Union. But I almost had to end my career even before it started, because the same year I started at National Academy, my older sister Rose suddenly passed away. Due to my Jewish traditions, I was expected to marry my sister's husband and care for the 2 children. Luckily, when I refused, my other sister Ruth assumed that responsibility. After more education, I continued working at National Academy from 1929 to 1932. My first graduating during the Great Depression made work extremely difficult to find, but I took the few jobs I could, being a waitress and a model, and I never gave up my dream of becoming a full-time artist. Then Jackson died in an automobile crash, ending our marriage in 1956. I devoted the rest of my life to promoting Jackson's work and legacy while continuing my own quickly growing career. Now that I was alone with no one to stand in my way, I knew I would make it big. I managed to change the way the world sees female artists and end the stereotype that women can't paint. I died on June 19, 1984, at age 75 from diverticulitis. And since my death, the Krasner Foundation was created to help assist the development of artists. And since its establishment in 1985, it has awarded over $46 million in grants to working artists around the world. Next time something is standing in your way, just push it aside and keep going. I believe you can make it if you try. Just remember to never give up.
Hello, my name is Judy Baca. I was born in September 20, 1946. When I was growing up, I was raised in a female-dominated household. My grandmother raised me while my mother was working. I never knew my father. Later in life, I entered school where we were only allowed to speak English. Through my life, I experienced difficulty in speaking English, but the thing that makes me famous is my art. This is important because from my artistic abilities to lead me to paint murals of the city of Los Angeles. Hope you learned something and thank you for listening.
Did you know I am one of the 25 most influential Hispanics in America? You probably didn't, but hey, my name is Marti Ramirez, and I am a Latin American artist. I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico on April 1st, 1955. In the environment I grew up, it focused on art and music because it was very popular. Growing up, I studied and practiced the piano, but later on it all changed and I became more focused and interested in art, especially art history. After living in Puerto Rico for about 22 years, I came to the United States to study art history at the University of Chicago. From there, I graduated with my PhD in art history. Studying art history was difficult since it wasn't a popular topic to study about. Later on, I became the first director of the International Arts of the Americas. Then I married a man named Hector Ola, who is a Mexican poet and translator. I treat America by being a big help in the project that's bringing Cuban art to America. In that project, I'm the person who organized the tour and traveled to Cuba to collect different Cuban art and interview many Cuban artists. I also treat America by making Latin American art more popular. I influenced many other art with a new kind of art. Today I continue to be a director and traveling to Cuba to collect different Cuban artists. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Jose Clemente. When I was growing up, my father was a businessman and my mother worked as a homemaker. We lived on the edge of poverty. Later on in life, after my father died, I did what I wanted to do, which was paint. I went to art school, where I became most known as a Mexican muralist. I illustrated the lives of poor and class folks. I was an unappreciated artist in Mexico, so I moved to the United States, where I was highly respected and people hired me to paint murals. And I was also featured in a Life magazine, and my motto is painting pleasures to heart. Thank you for listening. Hope you learned something today.
Hello everyone, my name is Faith Ringgold, and I was born on October 8, 1930 in Harlem, New York City. When I was growing up, I had asthma and spent a lot of time at home. I also did some sewing with my mother, who is a fashion designer, and I did some art as well. Eventually, I got married twice and I had 2 kids. I'm mostly known for my artwork. After graduating, I began my career painting landscapes and still lifes in the style of modern European masters. Some of my artwork include Neighbors and Die. During the 70s, I created a political landscape series where I can combine text and art together. I wrote a book called Tar Beach and became a popular children's book. As an artist, I became an activist because there were many places that were shutting me out as a woman and African American. Through my life, I experienced my practice quickly with vivid focus on my own experience and the political and social tensions that surrounded me, but the struggle for equality among women in the Black community. Involving text within my artwork seems to help me with my later explorations and written work by paving the way through my story quotes, children's books, and autobiography. I became very vocal about the need for equality in the art world, racial equality and equality between sexes. But the thing that makes me famous is being an artist. I presented the 2016 Jane Fortune Outstanding Women Visiting Artists Lecture on November 30th at IUPUI, and my artwork transformed the brain games became good exercise for the old and young. You can't sit around and wait for somebody else to say who you are. You need to write it, paint it, and do it. That's the power of being an artist. Thank you for listening. You've been a great audience.
Wait, say cheese. Great, now I can officially introduce myself.
Hello, my name is Dorothea Lange. Yes, the Dorothea Lange. I know what you're thinking and I will explain, but that comes later. My life was filled with thrills, pain, disappointment, and success. This is my story. I was born on May 26, 1895 in Hoboken, New Jersey, and given the name Dorothea Nutzhorn. My mother, Johanna Nutzhorn, stayed home with my brother Martin and I while my father, Henrik Nutzhorn, was a lawyer and worked for most of the day. When I was 7, I contracted polio, which is a serious disease that affects the nerves of the spine and leaves particular muscles unable to move. However, I got lucky. This permanently left my right leg noticeably weaker. It caused me to limp for the rest of my life. My luck, however, did not last. When I was 12, my parents got divorced. I always blamed the divorce on my father, so I dropped his last name and took my mother's maiden name, Lange, as my own. Art and literature were always big parts of my childhood and eventually my adulthood. Following high school, my mother forced me to attend New York School for Teachers. We traveled around the world documenting hardships for the Farm Security Administration. By 1940, I was the first female to win the Guggenheim Fellowship. I cared greatly about others. And one of the main goals of my photographs was to help society, to provoke society to correct injustices. However, this was very rare. One of my greatest accomplishments was I sent pictures taken during the Great Depression to an editor in San Francisco where they alerted the authorities and help was sent. They were therefore saved of starvation. I battled with health problems over the last 2 decades, and sadly, on October 11th, 1965, I passed away due to esophageal cancer. Today, my photographs sell for hundreds of dollars. Thank you for listening.
Art is no crime. It's every artist's responsibility to make artwork that is meaningful. Hello, my name is Shirin Neshat, and I live upon this motto. I was born in Qazvin, Iran on March 26, 1957. I don't remember much about my childhood, but what I do remember is that I enjoyed painting. I didn't have any siblings, but I only lived with my mother and my father. My mother was a homemaker, and my father was a physician. After that, when I was 17, I had to move to the U.S. to continue my education. I moved there as an immigrant because of an Islamic war that was happening in Iran. I was upset because I wouldn't be able to come back to Iran until 20 or more years later. When I was in the U.S., I worked at the University of California. I got my bachelor's and master's degree there in photography. After that, I moved to New York to continue a career. I got to take photos of Muslim women and men, and it had Arabic messages on them to show how Muslim women's lives are different from men and women that aren't Muslim. I worked in Dallas, Texas, and exhibited there in 2000. After that, I went back to Iran, but there were new laws set in for women which made my life harder. I was also struggling between 2 cultures. I didn't know whether to consider myself Iranian or American, which made my life a little bit difficult. So I decided to make artwork about it. I also started filmmaking. I did a film about men and women, which showed the differences between a woman's life and a men's life, and how women have different struggles and work hard and other things that they are not recognized for or acknowledged about. So I won an international award about that. I'm currently living at age 60, and I'm still making artwork and making a difference to the world today. Thank you for listening. My name is Shirin Neshat.
Carson. I am the first African-American woman to represent the 7th District, which is Indiana, and I'm only the second African-American woman congresswoman. I was born July 8th, 1938 in Louisville, Indiana. Louisville, Kentucky. Okay, my childhood wasn't ideal. I didn't know my father, and my single ill mother, Velma Porter, was my only immediate family. I had many jobs growing up, waiting tables, delivering crops, and harvesting crops and delivering waiting tables. Okay. I went to a segregated high school called Christopher Talks High School. And after that, I attended Indiana University in Bloomington. After I graduated, I got married, had 2 children, and got a divorce. And then my career began in 1968 when I met Congressman Andy Jacobs. He's the one that encouraged me to run for office myself after 7 years of being his secretary. In 1972, I ran for House Representative, and I won. After I was reelected once, I became a senator. And as I was working as a senator, I was an executive for an electric company called Cummins Engine Company. I also started an unsuccessful clothing business. Throughout my career, I was a Center Township trustee, a congresswoman also. I'm known for being an honest politician that looked out for the well-being of all people. and I died in 2007 at 69 years old, complications of a leg infection, but I was battling cancer up until my death.
Not one more deportation. That's what I fight for. Hi, my name is Melanie Cervantes. I was born in Herbert City, California. My first experience with structural racism was when I was in kindergarten, when I was forced to move from a bilingual class to an English-only class. I went to school and I began to paint posters. These posters were protest posters that led me to becoming the co-founder of Dignidad Rebelde, a place that has radical graphics that gets people's attention to make social change. I fight for the social change for immigration rights. I fight for this because my parents are immigrants and they got discriminated against. The way I fight for is by my art. One of my artworks said, "Ni una deportación más," which means not one more deportation. I'm really happy with what I do because I know I'm helping other people. I'm really glad that my artwork's inspiring people to join and fight with me. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening.
I try to give people a different way of looking at their surroundings. That's art to me. Hi, I'm Maya Lin, and I'm an architect and artist. Now, before we get into who I am, here's a bit of background. My parents both left China right before the Chinese Communist Act in 1949. They left a very prominent family that included a well-known lawyer and architect. When they came here, they worked hard right away. My mother became a literature professor at Ohio University. As for my father, he became a ceramist and the dean of fine arts. In 1957, they had my brother Tan, and finally, on October 5th, 1959, in Athens, Ohio, they had me. As a child, it was very easy for me to stay entertained. I had my father's studio at my access, I read a lot, and I was very involved with nature. I liked to bird watch, I took many hikes, and I fed all the animals that came to my backyard. Even all the birds knew when dinner time was. In high school, I stayed away from the typical Western girl. I didn't really wear makeup or hang out with friends. Let's just say I found it more enjoyable to solve math problems. I took many college-level classes and studied very hard. This all led to me being accepted into Yale University and graduating as co-valedictorian. At Yale was where my career began. When I was 21, what started as a class project ended up changing my whole life. The assignment was to create a design for the Vietnam Memorial. I created my design, I submitted it, and little did I know that I would place first out of the whole nation, out of 1,400 people. However, it caused a lot of controversy. First of all, it was because I was Asian. People felt that having an Asian's design would disrespect the soldiers who died to the Vietnamese. Second of all, it was because I was so young. I was only 21 at the time. An architect this young wasn't heard of, and people felt that someone with more experience should design it. Lastly, it was because I didn't have any personal connections to the event. Some people felt that someone who was more personally affected would create a better design, so it would bring out more emotion. All this led to me being called to the U.S. Congress to defend my project. After a lot of going back and forth and arguing, we finally came upon a solution. It was to have a statue of soldiers holding the American flag near my memorial. During this whole time, I went to Harvard University. However, I withdrew because there was just too much going back and forth. I ended up going back to Yale and receiving my master's. After my memorial, I didn't stop working hard. I created many other works of art and more other important events. I preserved the past for the future. Currently, I'm 57 years old, and I'm married to Daniel Wolf, and I have 2 children, India and Rachel. I'm also working on what is known as my last memorial called What is Missing. What is Missing is a project that is going to bring awareness to climate change. Climate change is affecting the whole world, and in 100 years, more than 30% of the world's plants and animals will be extinct. My project will utilize sound, media, and science, and will exist in many places at once. Be on the lookout for my project. Once again, I'm Maya Lin, and thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Gwendolyn Brooks. When I was growing up, I moved a lot when I was a kid. Later in life, I started writing poetry. During my life, I could only submit my work to black newspapers. But the thing that makes me famous is helping other writers. I hope you learned something. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Pablo Picasso, and I was born October 25th, 1881 in Malaga, Spain. Growing up, I never liked school, so I usually skipped to join my little communities. But when I was growing up, I barely had any money, so I had to burn some of my value with paintings and drawing. But do you know what is Cubism? Cubism is 2 different paintings and 2 different vantage points. That's what people know me by my 20th century pioneer Cubism. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Dapla Singh Sound. When I was born at 1899 and I died at 1973. When I was a kid, I wanted to be one of the American service for my mom and dad, but I was too young, and other people didn't want me to go there. But I just ignored them because it's my dream. I wanted to go there. But now that I'm old enough to work there, unfortunately, my mom and dad has passed away, and it's every man for himself. I'm the only family member, and we're in American service.
but people are still trying to convince me to quit my job and all this other bad stuff about my job. But I just ignore them. You know why? Because I believe in myself. I want to reach my goal. I already got everything I wanted, but my goal, that's all I want to. Never give up. If you give up, it's like giving up on life. Never give on your goal. Give up on your goal. And if you do, then you might have to find another one, but just never give up. If there's family members, best friends, anyone, just don't give up. Even though they say quit, just don't listen to them. You have to don't give up. Like if you do, then I'm sorry for you, cause like that's giving up on life. Just don't give up. No matter what happens, you can go through it, curve around it, whatever. You can do it. If you believe it, you can do it. Thank you for listening.